Well, I'm really sure that most of the folks that are listening to this are interested in the very same things that we have in terms of our research. And that is, how do you deal with pressure, the dynamics of pressure? And we started in the world of sport, and we transitioned into all kinds of high stress from military applications in medicine and in business. And what we found in our living laboratory was that the performance pressure is the same for everyone, whether we're dealing with a business application or a surgeon or an FBI hostage rescue team member, that basically there is this challenge before us to control this very delicate internal state that brings our best out. And what we've learned is that sometimes it's referred to as mental toughness, and what we learned that it's not just a one-dimensional construct, that it's more than mental. It's physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and it's also spiritual, quite surprisingly for people. That we've learned that how you take care of yourself, how fit you are, the diet that you have has a profound effect on your ability to manage stress effectively and deal with pressure. The other big discovery for us, and it was probably the most important thing in my career, was understanding the power of human energy. And that energy has quantity, quality, focus, and force, just like all energy in the universe. And basically managing stress, dealing with pressure, is managing energy. And the physical energy is the quantity of energy you have. The quality of energy is emotional. The focus of energy is mental. And the intensity of energy is actually spiritual. But what we're trying to do is to help bring the mobilization in terms of energy that will bring our best out. And so all training for us is basically training our energy systems, our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy systems. And when you do that, there's almost nothing that you can't handle if you properly train. And training is laying down energy deposits consistent with what you want. So we've really come to respect and have great admiration for the threshold that people have to reach in terms of managing their own energy with great skill. And it is an acquired skill.
So, Jim, I'm going to pick a few major themes from your latest book that really stood out to me, probably because I can relate. These have been some things that I have come to realize in my own self, and then have had great epiphanies on the other side of that. And I'm looking at my book now, the one that you wrote, that I have studied and underlined. And here are some of the words that I underlined. First, you're talking about a CEO named Scott, who is earning more than $1 million a year. And Scott says, quote, "I've been blinded by my ambition." And it seems that you write later that Scott has been, quote unquote, chasing things that lacked value. And then later you write that this is a condition of, quote, blindly pursuing external achievement, which results in a profound emptiness for all of us. Talk about this typical condition and this distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Well, this is a very big issue. The whole area of achievement motivation, what drives the highest achievement, has been more researched than any other area of psychology. And in a sense, we've all been duped. Society is very powerful in conditioning us to believe that achievements, external achievements, are really the bedrock of a successful life. That this is how we get happiness. This is how we become fulfilled. This is how we build a life of true success. This is how we build our character, by chasing achievements, these external achievements, by even at the earliest age, trophies and tournament victories, and then ultimately, getting our degrees and going on and doing these extraordinary projects and winning in the marketplace. But the truth is, those are all false. Achievement, external achievement by itself, does not leave one with a sustainable sense of accomplishment. You're only as good as your last achievement. So we've had to look much more deeply into what really does fulfill people.
So I want to talk about what are intrinsic motivations versus extrinsic. I think we all understand the desire to achieve in order to find our self-identity and sense of value and sense of accomplishment, which is what you're saying is the wrong motivation. So I want to get to what are intrinsic pursuits instead of. But before that, there's something you write here that I want to point out and have you extend on. And you write that the chase itself, the very fact that you are chasing these extrinsic values, can become obsessive in themselves. Explain that.
Well, it's interesting. Let's say that you're chasing a fame, or you're chasing money, or you're chasing power, you're chasing these various forms of extrinsic success. These are things that in and of themselves don't really give much value in terms of return in a sustainable way, but it's what you get back. It's like you're in your job because you're getting paid for that. You don't really feel that the job itself is creating much value for you. And what we've learned is that intrinsic drivers of success, things that actually, if you can find a way to actually, if you didn't even get paid for this is something that gives you a sense of ownership, a sense of value, a sense of feeling of really intrinsic enjoyment and love of learning. And it's so interesting that you can have the same chase. You can be chasing something extrinsically, but you can be doing it for intrinsic purposes. And it transforms the entire chase. We've learned we're obviously at the Human Performance Institute, we're about achieving great things. We're about winning. But we're helping people to understand how to take something that might appear to be purely extrinsic and actually repurpose it in a way that actually drives sustainable feelings of intrinsic value, that you're actually growing as a person. You're becoming more of the person that you really most admire in yourself, that you're learning new frontiers, not because you're getting paid, but because this is something you really want to explore in your own capabilities and expanding your capacity to deal with things. And you find a way to repurpose the chase so that it actually allows you to grow in very fulfilling and satisfying ways. So it's a very interesting, everything has a little intrinsic and extrinsic kind of quality to it, but we've learned the intrinsic drivers are the things that actually drive winning in a way that almost nothing else can.
So I think this is the big key here, Jim. So please see if you can provide some real specific instructions about how we can take these external achievements, these goals that we've got, and repurpose them to build character strengths, which are those intrinsic motivations. If you're seeing somebody who is pursuing great achievements and you can see that they are for external purpose, what do you teach them in order to change these from external motivations to intrinsic ones?
Well, the first thing we do is we ask people to think about who they are at their very best, when they're most proud of themselves. And when people do that, something very magical happens. And that what they begin to do is they begin to talk about their relationships with others. Very rarely do they talk about achievements that were great. And when they go into this space, they will say, I like myself when I'm kind, when I'm patient, when I care for others. I like myself when I'm very grateful. But it really defines a very special kind of connection to other people. And what that took us directly into was the character space, the moral and ethical character space. And so we make a list of those and we ask people, and you can do this yourself, kind of grade yourself on the extent to which you're able to manifest yourself at home, at work, with your loved ones, with people you care about, this best self. How much of that is actually happening in your life? Is it 10% or 20% or 40%? And what would happen if you actually leverage that up to like 70, 80, 90%? How much better would you feel about yourself, and how much more effective would you be in the world around you? So once they've done that, then we ask them to begin to define for themselves what might be referred to as their ultimate mission in life. When push comes to shove, at the end of your life, what must happen? And these very special character strengths that they identified in their best self exercise begin to take the form of an ultimate mission. I want to become a more loving mother, more loving father. I want to be a person who has great integrity, great honesty, truthfulness. These might become in a sense, the gold standards of how you're going to rule your life, the chase that you're on in every arena that you go to. Once those have been articulated, and this is oftentimes a very emotional experience for people, and it takes some very dedicated, it's not a quick exercise, but once you've established those two documents, my best self and my ultimate mission in life, and you'll see they're very connected, then you look at your life and what you're chasing. And then you begin to find ways you still must chase. You still must seek stress in your life. But now you're going to take all that stress and you're going to, let's say I want to grow in patience. So patience with others and patience with myself. And you use the chase, maybe now you're in traffic, and you use that to build the muscle of patience. Maybe when you come home and you're very tired and you're kind of grouchy and your children start to put a lot of demands on you, and suddenly you realize, wait a minute, this is where I can really build my muscle of patience, my muscle of engagement, my warmth and caring for others. I can do that in the workplace. And suddenly we find a rich opportunity every day at work and at home to move you closer to the realization of what you have already defined as the gold standard of a successful life for you. And that is chilling for people. They begin to realize that it's not the job that is holding them back. It's the chase at any expense. They lose their health, they lose their connection to others, they're not treating others in the way they know they've already defined as the gold standard for them. They're least loving and caring and responsive oftentimes to their own family members because they're tired and they're beat up, and they don't really recognize that, wait a minute, this is my life. The most important part of my life is the way I treat those that I care most about, and they often get the worst of my energy. And so those two little very simple exercises, when pushed, can become extremely profound in lives of so many people.
So Jim, let's talk about why this happens. You just mentioned that the most important things to us get the worst of us when it comes to the allocation of our energy. Why is it that you believe that we've become so addicted or obsessive about chasing the wrong goals? Where are our motivations coming from? Talk to us about what's in chapter 2 that's titled, How Did We Get Here?
Well, we get there almost unconsciously. We have been led to believe, we've been conditioned, we've been duped into believing that if you have a lot of money and you finally get secure with your finances, that happiness will come. And so you start chasing money, and you think, if I just had, $50,000 put away, I'd start to actually feel a little bit better. I'd feel like my family was going to be okay. And you get the 50 and you don't feel a whole lot different. You realize, well, maybe it's not 50. Then you feel like, well, maybe it's, maybe it's 250,000, and you get the 250, and that doesn't feel. And rather than questioning whether or not the pursuit of this is actually flawed, you dig in deeper and you chase more. And then suddenly, you have millions perhaps in reserve, and you still find yourself doing the same thing. There's an area of the brain that mediates all of these addictions. It's actually the same system that mediates all addictions, from alcohol, drugs, and so forth. And that same, it's called the nucleus accumbens, and dopamine is the factor that's released, the chemical agent that actually becomes so powerfully addicting. And it can be released in money, it can be released in all kinds of achievement, and you see people become addicted to achievement. And some addictions, like exercise, actually have a positive addiction. How about an addiction to kindness, or an addiction to gratefulness, or an addiction to generosity? When they are tempered properly, you can actually get a dopamine drip, so to speak. You actually get a nice sense of fulfillment. But because those are ongoing and they deeply connect to your value structure and your character, they're much more enduring and sustaining, and you feel better about it. So, we're a very interesting species. It's extremely complex, this neurochemical balance that we're trying to maintain is very, very powerful, and that's why we want to be very careful what we end up, kind of, putting our star in terms of how we're going to march forward. What are we chasing, and for what reason?
So tell us the story of Jessica, because I think she also exemplifies what happens on both sides of the ledger.
Well, Jessica, I think she was about 2010 that she came to the Institute, and her story is a very common story. This is not a story that's unusual, but she was, when she came, she was married, had 2 children. She came from very meager beginnings, but through a lot of hard work and effort, she got a scholarship, went on and got her undergraduate degree, and went on and got her MBA. And then she landed a job in a major company, and her salary and bonuses were in excess of, I believe, around $300,000. And when she came to the Institute, she began to describe this sense of inner emptiness. In spite of all the great accomplishments, she had little joy in her life. She said probably the most dominant theme in her life was emptiness or joylessness, and she couldn't figure it out. One of the things that surfaced, and this is some of the work we do, is we look at an individual's inner voice, and her voice was very much, a voice of relentless perfectionism, that she was never allowed to do anything except be perfect. And she pretty much had that voice for herself and for her 2 children. And this relentless chasing had become addictive for her. But when she went into the best self in her homework, she said she suddenly started to realize that she really liked herself at her best was when she was, in fact, very loving and kind to her children, to her husband, when she was warm, when she was highly engaged, and really giving more to not so much worrying about herself, but to others. And she kind of went into that space, and really pushed it. She started to cry. She says, I don't almost never cry. And she cried and cried and came back in the next morning and described to the class that just volunteered what had happened to her. And she said, I realized that the thing that I value most in myself, I never am. And that I've given up everything. And all of those qualities or strengths or whatever they are, she said, they've all atrophied. And I'm not a good mother. I'm not a good wife. I'm not kind. My direct reports see me pretty much as Attila the Hun. I get things done. I make things happen. But I don't like the person I've become. And so she really did a complete about-face, repurposed her job, and when she got into that space of her ultimate mission, it was defined in the sense of being warm and caring, loving, honest, integrity, and so forth towards her, most importantly, toward her husband and her children, and even changed the dynamics of how she would lead others. She wanted to lead them in an inspirational way as opposed to out of fear and a lot of distrust. And she came back several months later, brought her team, and defined what stages that she had gone through, and actually was quite open with her team about the transformation that occurred to her, and her husband and her children were absolutely astonished at the difference that they saw in her, and most importantly, her sense of fulfillment and her sense of satisfaction was, and even her direct reports on her 360s, which we got, all of them, was absolutely different. And so the big question is, would you say that she's probably achieving less? Is she not achieving the same levels? And the fact is, from all of the folks around her, her supervisors and the folks who were most knowledgeable about her, said that she's actually so much easier to work with. She gets more done. She's more creative. She's actually accomplished more in shorter time. And she's actually had a more positive effect on the team in terms of their accomplishments. So in a sense, no one lost. When she repurposed this, She won, her family won, her direct reports won, and the company that she worked for won. And that's what's so great about this, is that she didn't stop chasing, but she didn't chase at any expense. She had to make sure that she was leaving the legacy of her best self wherever she was, and that she was building the muscles that she most valued in herself, as really reflective of a standard that if she's going to be obsessed about anything, she wanted to be obsessed about giving the best that she had to her children, to her husband, and even to her direct reports, as opposed to just relentless pushing and never really having a sense that there was anything other than accomplishment that needed to be looked at here. So it was a very moving story, but it's a very common story in terms of what we see at the